Okay, so I'm going to model the first part of our grid that we've looked at so that you get an idea of how we're going to write some of these sentences. So I'm going to start the sentence off. You're then going to help me build the second sentence, and then you're going to have a go at doing the third sentence on your own. So we're going to do just that opening bit, and then you guys will have the opportunity to have a go at doing the rest of it on your own. Okay? So here we can see we've got that write a sentence or two describing how the man sat at the piano. So I've highlighted the things I need to include in here. So I need to think about the man's body language. So how is he sat? And think about how it might mirror his mood. Well, I know he's not particularly happy. He's reminiscing. He's going back, to some quite painful thoughts. So he's not going to be sat up, bolt upright, smiling and, dancing and jigging around. He's going to be sat in a way that's quite sheltered, quite closed off. His head might be hung low. He might have his shoulders slumped. He might have one arm like this when he's thinking. So I've got he's sat silently. He's hunched his shoulders. He's sat on his own. I've also got some expanded descriptions and adjectives. We've got a solemn expression. The solemn is one of the words we looked at last week, where it's quite sad. We've also got melancholy. There's lots of different words that you can think of from your adjective banks that you did this week. And then I've got here, what is he looking at and doing? We're staring at the piano keys, and I know he's going to then start playing the piano. So I'm going to magpie my first opening sentence that I originally did about how he was sat at the piano. But I'm also going to add an expanded noun phrasing because I just wrote that the man was sat at the piano keys. And I know from our lesson we looked at yesterday, I looked at doing expanded noun phrases and I described things being old and nostalgic. Now, nostalgia is where you go back and you think about happy memories from the past. And he's sitting there and he's rethinking about these things. So nostalgic is quite a good adjective to use, considering we're about to write the trigger and transition point into a flashback. So I'm going to up level the original sentence I wrote. I'm going to keep it fairly similar. So, sat silently. Sitting silently and alone. So here I've gone back to the skills we looked at yesterday. I've started with a verb opener. Okay, so rather than silent and alone, which I'd written in my original paragraph on Tuesday, I've now included the skills I learnt yesterday. So I've got a verb opener, and on here I've added an adverb. I've also been sneaky, and I've also included alliteration as well. So sitting silently and alone, the old nostalgic man hunched his shoulders. Now, this is where I used my expanded noun phrase because originally I'd just written the man hunched his shoulders, but I needed to include some of the skills I learnt from yesterday as well. So I've added an expanded noun phrase. Now I'm going to describe what he was doing when he was hunching his shoulders, and I know he was over the top of the piano keys. So let's see if I can explain how he's leaning across the piano keys and whether I can get in another adjective as well. So forward over the top of the yellowing black and white piano keys. So here I've added my additional adjectives of the yellowing black and white piano keys, and I actually wrote that from yesterday's lesson. Previously, I just explained that he was hunched forward over the top of the piano keys. So you can see I've already added an expanded noun phrase, additional adjectives, and an adverb and a verb opener just from changing very few words in what I originally wrote on Tuesday. So I've just been able to change the order of my sentences and the additional phrase I've got in there to expand on the information that's been given. So now we're going to have a go at writing the next part of our paragraph. So we now need to be thinking about the fact that he's now staring down at his keys. So I'm going to give you the next sentence. He stared down a long time before lifting his fingers to play. Now I wonder if anyone can spot my conjunction in that sentence. Good, I've used before, so I've used a time conjunction in there. So he stared down a long time before lifting his fingers to play. And that's almost linking to that idea that he sat there thinking. And he's thinking hard and deep because he's been sat at the piano for a long time looking at these keys, but he's not done anything just yet. So I'm always building that little bit of suspense up, okay, to build our story. So the next bit we're going to be looking at is we now want to describe his hands. Can anyone remember some of the adjectives that we came up to describe his hands? Oh, yeah, that was a good one. Paper thin. So paper thin skin covered. So paper thin. Now paper thin skin here covered his hands. Okay, paper thin is also a hyphenated word in there, but it's adjectives to describe his skin. Can anyone remember what it was that was covering on his hands? How would you describe his hands as an elderly gentleman? Okay, because it could be veiny, could be bony, could be frail. Could be very fragile, could be long and elegant. Usually people who play the piano have quite long fingers because you have to be able to stretch your fingers a long way. But I like the idea of using what I'd written previously where I explained that it covered his veins and his fingers, but can I include some adjectives to describe his veins and fingers? Oh, okay, so I could describe the blue veins, maybe bony fingers, because I think when you get old, I think everything tends to look a little bit more bony. So let's go with that. So paper thin skin covered his hands, delicately wrapping his blue veins and aging bones. Now, I was sneaky there. Can anyone spot one of the additional skills that I've included in this sentence? I included another adverb. So rather than just saying that the skin wrapped his blue veins and aging bones, I put they delicately wrapped his hands. Now I've gone for the word delicately because it's paper thin. If I was to pick up a butterfly that's got paper thin wings and I decided to roll it and scrunch it around in my hands, what's going to happen to my butterfly? I'm going to kill it. Again, its wings are going to rip. So that idea of having paper thin skin, you've got to almost link the adjective so that it's appropriate to the words that we're explaining. So obviously the skin is very delicate, isn't it? Because it's very paper thin. And I've included my additional adjectives of blue veins and aging bones. So that aging part there links again to the idea of his age and how old he is, so that we link back to how long he's reminiscing back in the past. So I'm going to start the next part of the sentence off and you're going to finish it off for me. So as he played. Now I wonder if anyone can actually tell me what skill I've started my sentence with. Good, I've got myself a fronted adverbial there. This is my subordinate clause. So I've started with my subordinate clause. So I now need a main clause that's going to make sense on its own. What I want you to include in there is that idea that all of that information and memories is now coming flooding back to him, okay? And that maybe he's going to see it flash before his eyes. So think about the original words that we used at the beginning, where we looked at all the different ways to use the transition phrases to introduce it. And I want you to have a go at writing the sentence on your own. Off you go. Okay, so I wrote it this way. So I just magpied this from the original part I wrote, but I've up-leveled it a bit. So as he played, the memories of the last 80 years spilled from his fingertips. Now I've used the word memories of the last 80 years. Okay. Now the idea of using the number of 80 suggests how old he is. He's very, very old. So he's got a lot of memories to go back and think about. But I've used the ideas of memories, but then I said it's spilled. So all just comes all the way back. And it's spilled from his fingertips because I know that it's the music that's triggered these memories, and that music is effectively coming from the fact that he's playing the piano. So his fingers are creating that tune and that music, which is triggering that thought process in his head. And then it flashed before his pale grey eyes. So originally I just said that they weld, the memories weld in his pale grey eyes, but here I've had the idea of flashed. So I've almost used the word flashback there by looking at the flash. It's a very quick, look back into the past, and use that idea of the flashed and his pale grey eyes has got my additional adjectives in there as well. And that's an expanded noun phrase because I've got my comma because it's two adjectives. So there you can see already, this is very similar to the original paragraph that I wrote on Tuesday. But all I've done is I've simply used some of the skills that I learnt from yesterday, and I've just added additional words and or changed the sentence. My very first sentence originally was silent and alone, the old man hunched his shoulders forward over the top of the black and white piano keys. What I did here to improve it was I did sitting silently. I changed it to a verb opener. How was he sitting? Well, he was sitting silently. Added in my adverb. I then added in an expanded noun phrase and additional adjectives. And the idea of them being yellowing black and white keys suggests how old the piano is and how long he's been playing it. Because when you buy a brand new piano, those white keys aren't white. Those black keys are black and they're white. As you start to begin to play them more, that colour begins to fade and they become yellow from all the bacteria and gunk that effectively sits on the piano. So that is my paragraph that I have written. And that's just the very first box on the grid that we filled out today. Okay, so this is my paragraph that I've written all together. Now, I'm not going to read this to you, and I've not highlighted where I've used all of the skills we've learned in the last week. But what I have done is I've highlighted on here where my transition and trigger points are in my paragraph that link to the next paragraph that would be my flashback. So what I want you to do is I want you to just pause the video. I can't really move myself anywhere, you can't see me, but you've got a copy of this sat at home with you as well. I want you to just have a go at reading it and just see how my trigger points lead up to what would be the flashback. So just pause the video and have a read. Okay, so you can see the different elements of where I've used the word memories, I've used the word past, familiar tune. So when something's familiar, obviously it's something you're used to. So obviously something he's done in the past. Thoughts drifting back to time, and almost that feel the grip of the Reaper himself. Now the Reaper, the Grim Reaper, is obviously the person of death. And obviously he's quite old, you know, he's flashing back to beyond 80 years ago, which means he could be even older than 80, because he wouldn't have been 80 years ago. If he'd just been born, he wouldn't have been in the army. So it's almost him reminiscing about his life, thinking he's about to move on, you know, to a different world and he's going to die. So your task for today is you're going to have a go at writing a paragraph yourself, just like the one that you've just seen. So make sure that your boxing up grid is completed, okay? So you can add any additional ideas to support your tasks. So you can see how I did it on this one, where I've added my bullet points that have linked to all of my questions, okay? You need to do the same thing and make sure you've filled out all of those boxes. You're then going to write your introductory paragraph leading back to the flashbacks. And obviously that first flashback was when he was sat there with his wife at the piano and she was playing alongside with him. Now use the information that you already know about the man, okay? So use my model example of my character description or the character description that you guys wrote yourself on Tuesday, okay? Think about his appearance, his actions, what might be going through his head, his thought process. But please, please, please use the skills that you have learnt this week. You can see how I've simply managed to up-level my work by using verb openers. I added additional adverbs and I used expanded noun phrases. But you've also got the opportunity to use your relative clauses and any opportunity to use the amplification skills we learnt from yesterday. So if we're linking back to the idea of remembering, here you can see I've played on the idea of memory because I've used memory, I've used past, I've used familiar, I've used drifting back to time. I've used all those kind of different words to trigger the idea of we're thinking about memories. And obviously memories are linked to flashbacks because you're remembering things from the past. So see if you can use any of the skills that we've learnt this week, but do not write the flashback part. Obviously the flashback part starts with his wife. We're not going to write that bit. You're just going to write that opening paragraph that's going to lead up to the beginning of the flashback. So you should have all the toolkits that were sent home to you this week. You've got your adverbs mat, you've got your fronted adverbials mat, and you've got your adjective mats. You also had your additional word phrases that I sent home to you yesterday, and all of the work that you've done this week. You should still have copies of all of that, and that's going to help you with your work this week, okay? So have a go at writing your flashback paragraph, and I'm looking forward to reading these potentially after half term, because obviously it's Friday today, so I'm not going to be able to see any of this work until it comes back after half term. But make it a really, really strong, really good quality piece of work, because if this work is really, really good, we can use these as evidence for your writing assessments after we come back, well, when we come back to school. So do your best, use your toolkits, use what you've written, use my model examples, go back and rewind parts of the videos if you need some ideas and inspiration, and have a go at writing your own paragraph yourself. Okay, enjoy year 5.